and welcome to today's video. Today I actually want to discuss an update that Google is beginning to roll out. It's called the Helpful Content Update. This is an update to their ranking algorithm. So this is potentially an update that will affect your website, will affect your clients' websites, and it's something that we as SEOs need to keep on top of. And web designers too. Everyone needs that little bit of SEO knowledge. This could be a big one. It might be nothing. It's kind of too early to tell yet. So I've been keeping an eye on things. I wanted to go through everything today, just what we know at the moment. As I said, it is very early. I may do another video after this rolls out, where we actually get more information on what types of websites were affected, even though they did indicate some of the categories that would be more affected than others. We'll go through that. But also just to go through maybe some case studies that people will offer up. A lot of people on Twitter are like super helpful, and I know that they will be sharing some of their kind of case studies on websites maybe that got hit with this thing, or hopefully, fingers crossed, the websites that benefited from this thing. So as always, thank you so much for joining me, and let's just sort through this together, because it's much easier to do this together than to do it alone. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Drop a comment if you're here as well, just to say hi, because it's just nice to see you all. Okay, so I'm just sharing my screen here. So I want to start off with this page on Google actually first. So this page is available on developers.google.com, and they now actually give us, so this is something that we used to create ourselves, and Brodie Clark used to be great at creating these type of lists where it will basically say when an update was rolled out on Google side. And it was something that SEOs, we used to just put things together ourselves and put dates on it and kind of build out this kind of map of ranking updates. But now you have a page on Google directly. So Google are now telling us on this page, so you can see the URL here at the top, that you can just visit that page and you'll be able to see any update and what date it started rolling out. And they'll most of the time as well say how long they expect the rollout to continue. So looking at this, we have the ranking update, release history, and we have here the August 25th one. So this is the Helpful Content Update by Google. So they have released the August 2022 Helpful Content Update. The rollout could take up to 2 weeks to complete. And they're linking to their blog, which is the Helpful Content Update. Yeah, which is this. So they've linked to a blog article, and here they're explaining exactly what we should expect out of this update. And it will be taking 2 weeks to process. So you won't necessarily be seeing much fluctuation at the moment, but it is too early to tell yet what the effect will be. So let's just read through this and we'll make sense of it together. So the first thing is focus on people first content. Now, I think this is something that we've been trying to do for a long time in SEO. This is something that John Mueller, he hasn't just hinted at this, he's also hinted at site-wide quality. And that's something that's going to heavily come into this. This particular ranking update is a site-wide update. So they are not just taking, isolated pages and saying these are poor, and kind of not looking at everything as the entirety of the website. So this is something that will affect the entirety of the website. And it's something that we've been kind of working towards, I would say, in SEO for a long time, providing good quality content. If you follow the channel or my Twitter or anything, you'll know that it's always user first content. Providing great quality content that's actually answering the questions people are asking, including video on the page if it's suitable, thinking multimedia when you're publishing pages, and not just keyword stuffing or just trying to hit those high traffic searches that you're trying to get as an SEO, but actually thinking we have to put the user first. And advice you'll also hear from me is that, sometimes when you're making decisions on your SEO strategy on your website, you'll have something that I can either put Google or SEO, like Google SEO first, or I can put my user first. And it always, always, always should be user first. This particular update to me makes that decision much easier. I'm hoping. So the helpful content update aims to better reward content where visitors feel they've had a satisfying experience, while content that doesn't meet a visitor's expectations won't perform as well. So how can you ensure you're creating content that will be successful? By following our long-standing advice and guidelines to create content for people, not for search engines. People first content creators focus first on creating satisfying content while also utilizing SEO best practices to bring searchers additional value. So they're just giving a kind of almost like a checklist here to see, are you creating helpful content or not? So do you have an existing or intended audience for your business or site that would find the content useful if they came directly to you? Does your content clearly demonstrate first-hand expertise and a depth of knowledge? For example, expertise that comes from having actually used a product or service or visiting a place. This is super important. This to me is linking in with authorship or publisher credentials, and you might have both on your website. Why, and this actually touches on, a little bit on about pages and bio pages. If you haven't looked into author schema, I don't know that they're using this directly, but this is just kind of a good practice thing, a best practice thing. Incorporate author schema into your content and include an author URL as part of that schema. Now, it's not a required field, it's an optional field. But I do believe that the more that Google goes down this particular road with this type of update, that the credentials of the author or the credentials of the publisher are becoming much, much more important. And these pages that can be a little bit neglected on a website, like the about page or like having a bio page for each author, this type of thing is just becoming crucial to your SEO efforts. And you need to be able to show on that page, why is this person or this publisher qualified to speak about this topic? Again, this is something John Mueller has hinted at for a really long time. I remember a Google Hangouts with him where somebody was asking about ranking for something that was outside of the topic of their website. And his I'm paraphrasing now, but the rough answer was, if your website is ranking for red shoes, you are not going to rank for an article about elephants. Because that is not where your expertise lies. That's not the niche that we know your website for. These are not where your credentials are based. So I feel that, we've already been told on a certain level by Google all of the things that are now going to be coming in this particular update. So if people have been paying attention to that dialogue, I don't think there's anything to worry about. Touch wood, I hope not. Because we should already be actually after doing things the right way. So this touches on exactly what I just said there. Does your site have a primary purpose or focus? After reading your content, will someone leave feeling they've learned enough about a topic to help achieve their goal? Will someone reading your content leave feeling like they had a satisfying experience? And are you keeping in mind our core updates for product reviews? Product reviews, this is a separate update. It's playing into this in terms of authenticity and quality content. But if you aren't dealing with product reviews, this update is still actually going to apply to you. So our advice about having a people first approach, I think we need to come up with a name for this, to be honest. I kind of always go like user first SEO, something like that. Does not invalidate following SEO best practices. And then, however, content created primarily for search engine traffic is strongly correlated with content that searchers find unsatisfying. So how do you avoid taking a search engine first approach? So is the content primarily to attract people from search engines rather than made for humans? That's a really, really important one. Are you producing lots of content on different topics? And again, this touches on what I just mentioned there about being known for a particular niche and then attempting to rank for something outside of that niche. So are you producing content on different topics in the hope that some of it might perform well in search results? So this is really, really interesting to me because I do love niche-based websites that are just for one specific topic. There are websites out there that might be trying to cover like a lot of different topics. And I'm wondering, are they going to struggle with this update versus those niche-based websites? And I think that's an interesting one. And I wonder, will there be a little bit of unfairness in that? So we'll have to see how this executes and what people report afterwards on that. Are you using, now this is what fascinates me because, and I'm just going to read it first before I launch into my diatribe. Are you using extensive automation to produce content on many topics? What they're talking about here, and you, again, there are loads of examples on this. I see them on Twitter and on LinkedIn. People who are creating entire websites, they may be publishing thousands of articles per day or per week. And they're all written by AI. So AI is capable of writing content. Now, as to whether that content is good quality or bad quality content is another story. Whether that content should be seen as a draft rather than a final product, that's another conversation as well. But this is really Google. So Google already had said that using AI content did go against its terms. And then they kind of loosened that definition somewhat. So now with this ranking update, they're saying, are you using extensive automation to produce content? So a non-human hand, let's say, on many topics. Now, again, they've kind of qualified that by saying on many topics. Are they saying that, you know, automation is okay if you're sticking to one niche topic? Or is it more when it's paired with many topics, that's when they're going to really penalize people? Again, like hard to call that at the moment, but I think that one is quite an interesting one in terms of AI generated content. Are you mainly summarizing what others have to say without adding much value? I suppose that would come into not quite duplicate content. So duplicate content can happen when you literally just have an exact copy of something else. This one could be where, you know, you are taking someone else's content, but you're maybe rewriting it a certain amount, but it's essentially the same thing. And you're not adding in any of your own thoughts, or you're not adding in any of your own opinion or anything that is coming from your own expertise in that area that then can, you know, disseminate whatever you're talking about. So another interesting one. Are you writing about things simply because they seem trending and not because you'd write about them otherwise for your existing audience? That's a really interesting one. And things that are sometimes, you know, in SEO, you can find these searches, they might be new. I think COVID was a very good example of that. Just things that never existed in the world before. And now people need to be able to Google them, but there isn't initially a lot of results being returned because that thing just never existed before. So when that happens, you know, it's more likely for Google to return poor quality content in the sense that they don't have that much to pick from. And now, is that providing a poor user experience for people using Google when they get caught with these kind of things, and people that are kind of just using these like opportunities, but they're using them in a kind of a negative way, and that they're not really answering the question, they're not really giving good quality content, they're actually giving really poor results, and they're kind of exploiting an opportunity. So that is also an interesting one, that, you know, it's all about your niche, your expertise, what you're qualified to speak about, and who is your audience, and is your audience enjoying that content? Does your content leave readers feeling like they need to search again to get better information from other sources? That's an interesting one. So you need to be sure that when people arrive in on your content, you are meeting whatever their query was with your content, and they're not left feeling that was a terrible result. I have to go back and I have to click on something else. Now that's always been a thing in SEO that we have tried to prevent. We try to answer the questions, we try and keep people on the page. Now I am speaking out of like how I would do SEO and my peers would do SEO, but of course there are people doing SEO out there that aren't necessarily thinking that way. So that can happen. There are some poor practices in SEO that wouldn't have that result for readers. So, you know, when you're Google, you do have to kind of tackle the bad side of SEO as well. So are you writing, I think this one's funny, and kind of like the way they use the bracket. So are you writing to a particular word count because you've heard or read that Google has a preferred word count, and then brackets, no, we don't. So I don't know why they threw this in here. I guess it's just one of those SEO myths. They do have an SEO Mythbusters whole YouTube series. So I think that they're on top of the SEO myths. They know exactly what the SEO myths are that go around, and that people become aware of, and people start trying to game the system using these SEO myths. And of course, there's no evidence or proof to any of those things. They're just kind of things that people have come up with on their own, and Google has never verified anything in that manner. So this is a very popular SEO myth. So they're just kind of tackling that. But to be honest, there are so many other SEO myths as well, that probably you'd have to go to their Mythbuster section to like go through all of them. But interesting that they're aware, very, very aware, and very on top of what are the myths out there. Did you decide to enter some niche topic area without any real expertise, but instead mainly because you thought you'd get search traffic? So again, you must tell Google who you are, why you have the credentials to talk about what you're talking about on your website. If you do not have credentials in that area, you do not have expertise, you are not qualified to speak on that topic, this is going to penalize you, is what it looks like, this particular update. And then, does your content promise to answer a question that actually has no answer, such as suggesting there's a release date for a product, movie, or TV show when one isn't confirmed? So that would really be, I would say, a fake news kind of a thing. People are searching something, you know, and you can suggest something. Obviously, from Google's point of view, it's a real disaster, especially when they do things like featured snippets where it kind of answers the question directly on the page. So imagine that someone has supplied content answering something and the answer isn't real at all, and there is no answer, but Google picks this up and maybe presents it as a featured snippet so that someone searches something and immediately they can just read an answer on their phone or their laptop, and it turns out that there was no answer and that is their fake news, basically. Also, that is something, I suppose, that could get them into trouble with regulators, or depending on what they're after serving in this scenario and what category that's falling under. I could see how that would be a really, really major problem for Google. So we're going to go into, this was a blog by Danny Sullivan. He's also very active on Twitter if you wanted to follow him. So he wrote this blog. So he said, next week we'll launch the helpful content update to tackle content that seems to have been primarily created for ranking well in search engines rather than to help or inform people. This ranking update, so this part is quite good, okay? So I'm going to go to here, okay. This ranking update will help make sure that unoriginal, low-quality content doesn't rank highly in search. And our testing has found it will especially improve results related to online education, as well as arts and entertainment, shopping, and tech-related content. So this is really useful because they're at least telling us like the industries that we would expect to be hardest hit by this update. Now, again, this update is going to be one part of many different signals in the algorithm. So there is no one kind of signal that is, besides, you know, something that it was a manual penalty that was enforced by a human. But there is nothing that's like, oh, this one thing is going to make me or break me. So this while this sounds very dramatic, and it sounds like a big update, this is still one of many signals. But again, it's too early to say. We still have 2 weeks to go, kind of a couple of days off that, but it's still going to take a while to figure out who's getting hit by this. So, but this is very useful if you do have websites in these areas. And then that it's looking for unoriginal, low quality content. So this is something that in SEO we've been doing for a really, really long time. So one of the I'll just speak for my own area. One of the first things we do when we go into a website to perform SEO in it, and I'm just going to go back to my screen here actually, just to, I can remove that for a sec. Okay. Oh, hi, Cynthia. My friend Cynthia is here. Yeah, so where was I? I'm going to go back to here. Unoriginal, low quality. Okay. So one of the first things that we do as SEOs when we go into a website is that we start to we have a decision to make. So we look at what pages on this website would fall under the low quality or thin content, you'll hear it referred to, category. And you actually compile, okay, what pages on this website are really thin content that are not providing value to the user or the visitor. And then you have a decision to make with that content. You look at, look at the data and see, is there anything that you have found in this that is actually driving traffic to the website? So it has some kind of a ranking, but it is falling in the ranking. And when you look on the page, you can see that it is like a low quality page when it comes to content, and it may not be answering people's questions entirely. You can pinpoint some of this stuff actually using Google Search Console. In Google Search Console, if you narrow things down to just that page and you see the queries that people have used to arrive in to that page, you can now check, are those queries being answered by that page? And sometimes you can actually find that Google is returning a page for a particular query and you haven't actually answered that query on that page. So it's almost like a mistake by Google, or maybe a lack of competitive content, and they're really stuck and they're having to give something to users. And so they end up returning your page. So a technique I love is to actually go through that data, find those queries that are coming in that aren't actually answered on your page, and now update that page. So instead of, you're not deleting it, you're actually updating it because it did have a ranking, or it has a ranking and it's slipping. It is thin on content and you don't want it to get hit with this algorithm update. But you can see as well that Google is almost trying to return it for searches that it doesn't necessarily meet. Now, when you look at that data and you look at those searches that the page is appearing for, can you edit that page to include for those additional questions? And then just look at the page generally as well. And instead of looking at it as, I'm going to do keyword research, and I think keyword research is really, really handy. I think people also ask those questions are brilliant if you can answer those. But you also have internally in your company questions that come in. And as SEOs, we can actually, communicate with our clients and find out what are those questions coming in that this page could serve. And can we expand out and flesh out this page to actually be much more useful and be much more relevant to people's queries, and to actually use some of the real world questions that people are asking, if it's a brick and mortar business, when people come in and they're asking questions, can we answer those? Than just using, let's say, the data that we get through various SEO tools and using keyword research. So I'll share my screen again, I think, and we'll just go through. So that was for unoriginal content. Okay. So there's another update. So this is to do with product reviews. So there are other updates going on with product reviews. I won't be going on into that in this particular stream, but they are mentioning that in the coming weeks there will be another update to make it easier to find high quality original reviews. I do believe, and I'm going to show here on Google Trends, there is something happening on Google where people are putting Reddit into their query. And a lot of times this can be around reviews. So it means that people who are using Google to search aren't finding the most authentic or real reviews via what Google is returning. So they're actually putting in Reddit so that they can pull up what they would consider to be more authentic conversations by real people and more authentic reviews by real people that will then be served up by Google. But they're qualifying it by putting in Reddit. And I think that this is quite dangerous for Google. This is a search engine that has built its whole business model is that it returns the best results for your queries, original content that served your query, that you trusted, content that you trusted. And it's beginning to, this thing around putting Reddit into your search because the results coming back in Google are not authentic enough. That's a big deal. And when you couple that with the rise in AI-based or AI-generated content, I see people posting case studies. I don't know how real these case studies are, but they are posting screenshots of websites that they have set up with 100% AI-generated content. And the traffic, when you look at it for Google, is literally boom, 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 up and up. And Google is devouring this content. But just because Google is devouring it or has up to now does not mean that that's going to continue. And I think that that is for sure the type of content that they are looking to, I don't want to say cull, but they're just looking to basically down rank that type of content. And they want to up rank content from real people, real experts, real companies, that are speaking not to the algorithm of the search engine, but are speaking to the people who have arrived in on the website. So I'm going to go into Twitter. I just want to show what is after coming up. This is a Cyrus Shepherd. He's so good to follow on Twitter. So he was actually following. So even by Google standard of slow rolling new algo updates, so far, the SEO impact of the helpful content update seems nearly invisible. Now, he did only post this on August 26th. So I don't know that you would necessarily, I think after a day, I think it was the 25th that it came out. So I don't know that you would see anything that quickly anyway. But what I'm wondering is, and I know somebody made a good reply to me. So I said, depends. I'd like to see how the 100% AI generated huge websites are doing. And then I thought this was a very good point. If they were targeted and nuked by this with this update, then everyone else should still see volatility as those SERP positions held by AI sites are vacated and replaced by the winners. Now, I wonder how quick that replacement would happen. I don't think we're going to see anything from this thing until it's completely rolled out. And even then, I think it's going to take a while, months, I think, to really see maybe wins out of this. Maybe it depends on what space you're in. I don't know, there are certain spaces maybe that have more of these AI generated websites than others. So maybe those people will see wins a bit quicker. But I think for the general website, you're not going to see those wins super fast. But I think it was a very good point at the same time. So that was the impact there. Lyndon said that it's not likely to be heavy or hard hitting, at least not to start with. And then he said there's these points. 1, we have no idea what they're actually targeting. And 2, we may not be looking in the right places. And a couple of more people saying they're still seeing bad content, unhelpful content. Someone else saying it's because everyone deleted their unhelpful content last week. That's actually a thing. I have seen people reporting on Twitter that they are deleting content. I just think don't rashly kind of delete your content. Look at the data in Google Search Console first. And if you have pages that are worth updating, and maybe pages that they're not so relevant to some of the queries, but you could include those queries on the page, please do that first. Please do that before deleting your content. And then you may still delete content, and that's okay too. Deleting content is also good. Let it go to a 404 page. This is a normal part of the internet. You do not get penalized by Google for that. They understand that pages can sometimes go 404, and there's, not to my knowledge anyway, there's nothing in the algorithm for that. It's a normal part of operating on the internet. So, but don't delete your content rashly. Look at the data first. So again, some more of the content. This must mean everyone's content is indeed helpful. SEOs deleted unhelpful content. Yep, some did. Yep. Now, as I said, this has actually been a technique that we've used in SEO for a really, really long time, is actually getting rid of thin, we would call it more thin content, and then adding to the quality content. What I love with this update, because it's site-wide, sometimes in SEO, you may have pages. I'll just go onto this tab while I talk about this one, but you may have pages in SEO for clients that are thin, and there might not be that much you can do about it, depending on how the system is outputting content and what the developers are able to do for you. And you might have got it to the better point that you can, but it's still maybe not great or a little thin. What I like about this being a site-wide indicator is that, let's say you start up a blog on that website and you do really great quality content on the blog that's then internally linking back into those pages. With the blog being that high quality, user first content that Google wants to see, this is a strategy that can actually uplift the entire website. And I really like that Google are not just taking things as like individual pages or groups of pages or anything, but that they're actually looking at it as a site-wide thing. Because in the reverse, like, we look at that in the negative way, like if there's thin pages, they pull everything down. But in the other way, if you generate high quality pages that users enjoy, you can elevate the whole website with that technique. And that, I think, is very, very powerful as well. So that's something to bear in mind with this. So this is what I wanted to draw your attention to. So this is about putting Reddit with review. Okay, so we've just put into Google Trends and we're looking at worldwide for the past 12 months, right? Search terms that had the words review and Reddit. And you can see it's going up. I don't know if we look at that. Let's say we look at that for the past 5 years. Yeah, okay. So we look at that for the past 5 years, and you can see and this is only for Google. This data is only for people who Googled something that had the word review and the word Reddit in it. And this is the interest over time. And this to me is major, and I don't think we're talking about this enough. I know it has come up in SEO circles as a kind of a chat, and we've had a little giggle about it. This is really, really serious in my mind. If I was Google, this is a threat. This is an indicator that my search engine is actually failing people. And as I said, when you couple that with the AI generated content, I just think, they've been working towards this, but they have to, for their business to survive, they have to find a way to serve people useful content that actually meets their query. What they would want to see is a decline in people putting Reddit into what they're searching, because that would show that Google is now beginning to show authentic search results, and people aren't so inclined to put Reddit in because they don't need to. They're putting that in at the moment because they need to put it in to get good results back. So I just want to look at like some of the things, like I don't know what some of these things are, so I apologize. I'm just not like cool enough, but Elden Ring review Reddit. So that's somebody that they're not wanting Google to decide what is authentic in this search result. They want to show Google a way to show me authentic results, which is by showing me Reddit results. And that's a real threat. That is a real threat. It means that the Google results have been bad. So, and there are so many of these things that are Reddit in the actual in the related queries, like so many. Like, it's incredible that people have been doing this. And when this first came onto my radar, that people were putting Reddit into searches, I just immediately saw that as such a threat to Google, because it means they have failed in answering that query to a certain extent. So I think that is everything that I wanted to go through today for this particular update. It is the Google Helpful Content Update from August 2022. I will come back and do a follow-up video on this just when we know a little bit more about it, as we get some case studies back or see some websites that have been hit. If you have, please find me. I put my tag here for Twitter at Proximal Webs. Drop me a note and we can have a chat. And if you have been hit with this, drop a comment or give me an old tag on Twitter or anywhere, and we can have a chat about it and see, you know, what you can do with your website to actually elevate it back up again. If you are hit with this update, you will be able to recover. This is an algorithm that's always running. They did mention that, you know, they need to see that the unhelpful content is gone, and that helpful content is now there. And it could take months of, let's say, good practices on your website to recover from this update if you're hit. So it will be uphill to kind of recover from it, but at the same time, everything is recoverable. And, you know, they've kind of shown us the way as well. They've shown us what they want, and what they want is what users want. So that's it. So just hopefully you're doing okay. Hopefully you're ready for this update, and that all of our websites will be okay. And even if you are a little bit hit, look, you can always go over that older content. You can locate what would be dragging down, let's say, the overall quality of the website, and then just tackle it. You know, it's just a matter of identifying those pages, deciding whether to update them or delete them. Maybe you want to put a link on one of them to an updated version of the article. So there are things you can do to recover from this update if you are hit. So don't worry in that sense, everything is recoverable. So I hope you enjoyed this stream, and thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And thank you for supporting the channel. And hopefully I'll see you again soon. I'll come back I'll probably take a couple of weeks first, but we'll come back and have another chat about this update. Bye, everybody.